Hey, it's Drew, and I just recorded this really interesting episode with Barry Nolan, who is the CMO of a mobile app platform called Swerve. And we didn't talk a lot about Swerve. What we talked about is, as a marketer, how you can get on the front lines of your business and really put your theories to the test by being the salesperson for a day or a week and get in front of your customers and understand on a B2B basis. I can't imagine anything more educational and something that will forever cement you in the eyes of your salespeople as one of members of the team. Go out there and make the pitch. And with that, take a listen to this episode.
Welcome to Renegade Thinkers Unite, a show that will help you transform your marketing from mere messaging to programs that break the rules and make a difference. Join the movement today and learn non-traditional techniques that give you an edge. Now, here's your Chief Marketing Renegade, Drew Nizer.
Okay, well, my guest today is Barry Nolan, CMO of Swerve, which is, you're going to learn a lot about. I'll let him tell you about it in a minute, but we're going to do Renegade Rapid Fire to get things going and so we can get to know Barry really quickly. So, Barry, are you ready?
I think so, Drew. I'll know in a minute.
All right. Well, so let's start.
This sounds frightening, rapid fire.
It is. What's your definition of marketing?
Oh, geez, thanks for that up front. Very simply, it's really a set of activities to profitably create and keep a customer. And that's changing rapidly in the world, as we're going to get into later in the podcast.
And what is the primary role of the CMO?
I would boil it down to 5 things. 1, create a narrative as to why a company or a prospect would want your service. Express that, to those individuals in an enterprise who will purchase our service, and create content and cascade content to said personas. Rinse and repeat and instrument.
All right. Rinse and repeat. One of my favorite things. Okay. And what's your favorite part of the job?
I suppose it's combined, my favorite and least favorite, and I'm actually in it right now. My favorite part of the job is, as a CMO, and I believe every CMO should do this, is leading the pitch to large enterprises and speaking to customers and explaining what you do and convincing them, that they need you. The least favorite part of that is preparing that. So I've got one of these big pitches in London in 2 days' time. And metaphorically, we're staring at the blank sheet of paper because they have some unusual requirements. And a pitch always looks polished at the end, but it's the grind is the least favorite part of the job. So
you love showtime, but not necessarily the preparation that goes into it.
It's just the agony. Is this right? Are we doing the right thing? Let's go down this route. That's terrible. Let's come back. All of that. It's that sort of, agonizing process, but you have to go through it nearly every time,
Well, it certainly means that you'll learn the business and the business and you know what's working. And so you can't turn to sales and say, dude, you're getting it wrong. Cause at this
No, totally.
Right.
Yeah.
So what, was your first priority in the first your top priority in the first 100 days as a CMO?
Well, it's kind of related to what I just said. I mean, I think just to give some backdrop, we're a B2B company and we're a startup that speaks to very large enterprises. But I think the key imperative for a CMO is, in the first 100 days, is to lead some of your most strategic pitches. Let me explain why. Because, marketers have a herd instinct, or an instinct to sit back in the cheap seats, read all the analyst reports, read all the buzzy PR puffery, and opine from cheap seats, and repeat phrases, and regurgitate the latest buzzwords. And nothing slays that instinct like having to sit in front of a prospect and, authoritatively explain why they're going to invest their future in you. So if you're doing B2B and you're a CMO, You need to be able to lead these pitches because it removes all these instincts and it gets to the essence of what, your company is or what your narrative is. And it crystallizes everything you need in that process, not just in the initial pitch, but in the subsequent closing. So it's a bit unusual. I think CMOs should do that. And it's an incredibly, important part of the process. Very few do, which is very curious to me.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting that you say that, because I have to say in recording 80 of these episodes, I don't think I've ever heard a CMO saying, I want to be on the front line pitching so that I understand. And it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's a general getting out in front and not just leading the charge. Certainly that helps get respect to the troops, but most importantly, it gives you the knowledge that you need, because nothing like a good failure to sort of educate you on what's wrong.
No, totally.
Right. And it certainly eliminates any kind of passing the buck. And there is such a tension between marketing and sales. Hey, we brought you the leads, how come you couldn't close it?
No, totally. A sales guy will say, can say, if you've never signed for the customers, well, that's wrong and this is wrong, etc. But if you've done it and you're successful and you're increasingly successful, that gives you authority to address that, sales conversation. But it's much more about just sitting in front of customers and listening to them and understanding their problems. And that inspires a lot of, not just content and understanding what's in their mind. And just to go back to the point, there is a disconnect between, the echo chamber of PR releases and the echo chamber of analysts and what's going on, what's the latest, and where enterprises are. And there's always quite a big gap. So just to hear that firsthand is incredibly important.
It's very interesting. We're going to dig into that in a little bit. But let's talk about the best advice you were ever given.
I can tell you the worst, but I'll do the best.
No, tell me the worst. That's even better.
No. I'll do the best. That would be profane, perhaps. So we won't go there too early in the podcast.
All right, fine.
I suppose it's probably you've probably heard it before. We're often told, to be rounded and big up your skills and have a wide variety of capabilities. And I don't believe in that. I just think that if you have an understanding of what you're good at and what your strengths are, and focus on them, because they'll make you exceptional. Many years ago, I was in an organization called Water for Crystal, and the HR department and the management team, did this, profile. You profile your personality and who you are and what you are and where you are in this wheel. And I came across just incredible, very, very sort of biased towards being creative. And, and this is, you're a creative, pursue that. And that has always been my strength. And I've actually, to be honest, I've only latterly realized how important that is, where you can actually dream up stuff or express stuff or do storytelling or craft narratives, versus, delivering bromide or delivering, standard, pitches. So that's the most important thing. Just be aware of, what you're good at. And focus on that, and don't focus on the things that you will never be good at, because if you work on really hard at them, you become mediocre in them.
Yes, exactly. I think that's really interesting. So we're going to rephrase the question. It's like the best advice you can give to people, and I think you're right that focusing on your strengths, assuming you're really good at those, then you just hire into your weaknesses. I mean,
totally.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you're a creative marketer who understands ideas and communications, hire a data person, right?
Exactly.
That's really interesting. Okay. And what has been, as you look at your career, your proudest moment as a marketer?
I've had a pretty blessed career. I've had a very blessed startup career with 3 IPOs and 1 sale to Apple. So that's gone well. But I think the most, interesting one was a sort of an offbeat one. It was my very first job. I worked for a company called Water for Crystal, which is a premium luxury brand. It was my very first job, of crystalware that would sit on your table or sit in your cabinet. They were formed in 1851, and I joined as a very cocky, marketing guy in 1995. But they were very, very traditional, a very traditional design. And we just to create some PR and some buzz, the idea to hire in a fashion designer to create a more contemporary Crystal brand, sub-brand. It was really a PR exercise. It took a couple of years, and taps, in creative story we're talking about. But we did a launch in Dublin, in Ireland, that went unbelievably well. And as with every good launch in Ireland, it ended up in the bar till about 4 a.m. and the next morning I woke up with a hangover, incredibly late, with my phone ringing and saying that the stores had sold out already. And that was just, an incredible moment. And since then, that one brand of crystal wares got on to sell hundreds of millions, and it's still selling today. I actually just looked it up the other day, and some of the original designs are still selling. So that's probably, going way back to the very start, was the most lucky but most enjoyable sort of moment in my sort of marketing career.
And I think that's such a great example for the folks, because we talk a lot at Renegade about the 4 pillars of courage: artful, thoughtful, and scientific. And one, you had the courage to do something that wasn't seemingly on brand, but it was, because you had this artistic designer. And the thoughtful part of this, to me, and this is one thing that we constantly emphasize on the show, it's not about the words, it's about the actions that you do. If you want someone to think differently about your brand, you have to do something. So in this case, Waterford creates a whole new line, an unexpected line. Nobody saw that coming from you. But somehow it was still crystal, so it wasn't like you decided to make Swatch watches, right? You still do in the category, but it was unexpected, and obviously the signs came and that you sold it out. So anyway, I see why you like the program.
I wouldn't say it was courage; it was just naivety, and this is a fun thing to do. But if you were to think about it today, it would be a courageous thing, because it would be in a plan, it'll be a big thing. And sometimes when you sneak things under and do experiments, you get unexpected results.
Love it. Love it. All right. So, last question for you in Renegade, rapid fire. Do you think machines will ever be able to do your job?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, really?
Yes. And the sooner the better.
Okay. So once the machine is doing your job, what are you going to be doing?
Well, if you get machines to do your jobs, you can move up to higher order jobs or do interesting things or get better results. I mean, if you think about it, we sell a service called marketing technology. I'm not going to go into that, but if you think about the aim of marketing is to know and understand the customer so well that you can wrap the service around them. And today we now have systems that operate at such speed and such scale that we can actually tailor marketing and experiences to that individual's anticipated need. And you can never do that today without machines. Like a practical example. So in marketing tech land, we all use this language and we all use these design metaphors called journey builders. On day 1, a person will visit my website. On day 3, I'm going to send them an email to remind them about their visit to the website. And these are like manually planned constructs by the marketers of what a logical customer journey ought to be successful. You know what I mean? On day 6, they will convert. The thing is, machines know and have a good understanding, if you give them enough data, to replace all that. And they can replace with an understanding at an atomic level of that individual, when and where they're going to do, are they likely to convert? And we do lots of this today. And so it's not that, to go back to your questions, will machines ever be able to do your job? They're actually going to do big parts of our job and do it a lot better than humans can ever do. So I really believe that.
Well, all right. So we're going to take a break. The machines will be taking your job. TriNet is listening to the show. Minority Report was all real. You heard it here first on Renegade Thinkers Unite. We'll be right back. Hey, it's Drew. I wanted to use this break to ask you a single question. Are you a courageous marketer? Do you have the courage to go to your board of directors and say, marketing could drive the growth of this company? We just need 3 times the budget. Do you have the courage to take the big idea that you already have and extend it internally and externally through influencers, through the media, through all of your content? If you're a courageous marketer but aren't sure how to roadmap all of this, I have a big idea for you. It's called Renegade Thinking. It's a program that we've developed and work with exclusively for B2B marketers, generally at large companies. And I want to give you my cell phone, 917-679-8852. Just text Renegade Thinking to 917-679-8852, and we can talk about how you can cut through. Okay, we're back, and my guest is Barry Nolan, and we've been talking about machines taking over marketing. But seriously, I think you started to touch on some very interesting things. What the machines will be taking over is some of the, a lot of what you were talking about is sort of predictive and, using machine learning so that they can do things like next best action, right? So the prospect responded this way or didn't respond. Therefore, the next best action is this based on the behavior of others that look like them. That to me is sort of interesting, sort of decision trees that obviously a computer can do. But within there, though, there's got to be some margin for creativity where a really creative individual, which machines struggle to do, would say, you know what, we can leapfrog this. And here's my big question on what we were just talking about. I've seen some studies that suggest that what you're talking about with machine learning is incremental, whereas a big creative idea is algorithmic. And so I'm just wondering seriously in this conversation, do you really think that the big opportunity for a brand like yours and for marketers like yours is to just go all in on the spend on marketing automation and worry less about the big brand idea and the way it's communicated?
No, I mean, no, absolutely, not at all. I mean, the core of any marketing organization, and it all starts with, is a narrative, which is why do you exist, and the narrative articulates, marketing articulates that company narrative. And the narrative isn't an algorithm or it isn't a widget. It's things like why change and why change now. And the best way to do that is to, contrast an existing situation with a pervasive vision of the future. The machine, so that's always going to be a human process. And it also has to be an authentic process. Far too much of content which comes from narrative is clickbait and BS, to be honest with you. And it's just, feeding this, massive content machine that we have to output content. And actually, we've pulled a lot of that back and we, focus on authentic content that will resonate with people. So that part of it, though, will never change. And that's the core of it. And that's a human process and that's a creative process. And the more authentic it is in terms of meeting need and articulating how you meet said need is super important. Where the machines work and where the automation works is in how that message is cascaded and delivered to individuals. Be that to in a B2B environment where you're reaching out to 3 or 4 people in a large enterprise, or in a B2C environment where you're reaching out to millions, if not billions, of consumers who typically today live behind a mobile device.
So you've used the term narrative, and we've heard this on the show a lot, and we talk a lot about storytelling. But I think there's a lot of confusion as to what that really looks like, and how is that different from a traditional marketing strategy statement, which is to convince our prospects to use our product instead of another product because we're better for these 3 reasons. How is the narrative actually constructed?
Yeah, I mean, we often in marketing have, or in any industry really, have a tendency to dress up the same concepts, the core concepts, new language. And a lot of this probably goes back to, core, propositions around positioning, when a consumer thinks of you, your brand, what images are they evoking? So, but the thing about software and selling software is, largely it is, of course you can demo it and you can show a feature and all that sort of stuff. But so much of it is how you articulate what you do with words and with images. And that's a massive part of it. Like, for instance, in our interesting, struggle, or sorry, it's not struggle, our interesting sort of, go to market is, there's only perhaps 150 people in the world we are seeking to reach out to and speak with. So when you do reach out and when you get to speak to these individuals, they have a profound impact on our future. And therefore, it's profoundly important that when we do speak to them, we are speaking in a way that deeply resonates with them and paints a picture for them of what the situation is today and what the situation can be and how that impacts them personally and how that, more importantly, will impact their company. So our sort of narrative process, we do this, every year. We've just gone through the process again in the last number of months. We get some consultants in to come and help us. In this case, we had Corporate Visions come in and did a great job, and they deconstruct us and remove all the language that we have, that we've accumulated, almost like barnacles on a super tanker where you attach all these features to your product, and they deconstruct what it is we do, what it is important to customers, and rebuild that. And actually, we're just gone through that process, and it's again going back to it's a hard process, and there's a lot of confrontation in it, which is essential and important and valuable.
Interesting. And deconstructing is so good because it's the baggage that a brand has. Well, we always talked about ourselves this way. So what did you find in this process that you needed to get rid of?
Well, the first thing you need to get rid of is if you ask 10 different people in the organization what we are and what's our proposition, you get 10 flavors of ice cream, and secondly, get away from things like PowerPoint, and just bring it back to first principles. What's going on with our customers? What's going on with the customers we want tomorrow? What are they really struggling with? Where do they need to get to? But that can be, 45 different things on a page. And you need to bring that back to 1 or 2 or 3 sentences. That when I or a sales individual, more preferably, goes to that individual, they can confidently and authoritatively speak. So it's many days of sitting in a room and deconstructing, reconstructing, and then the process of writing that up, and then that's essentially the marketing DNA of our narrative, which today in our organization is manifesting itself in all your websites, all your content, etc., and doing a big refresh of that. The other thing to be cognizant of is you have a product organization which are having the same conversation with customers. We all are, and you need to be in step keep with that, and almost sometimes be quite ahead of that, and saying this is where we're going, and articulating a compelling an important vision of the future. So there's many actors that you need to bring in. So what we did as an exec team is we brought everybody into a room in San Francisco for 2 days initially and invested a lot of time in doing that process so that everybody's bought into it. Oftentimes marketing exists as a silo manifested on a press release that's divorced from what everybody else is saying, in the organization about what we are and what we do. So that recalibration is absolutely essential.
It's interesting. So one of the episodes I did earlier was with Scott Ulrich, who is the CMO of DocuSign, and he talked a lot about setting a vision for the organization and making marketing the driver of that. And what was essential, and I think the real insight there that you mentioned is if marketing is right, and we'll use your term narrative is right, you're really painting a picture of vision for the company, and then product development can follow. Because often what I see is there's you rebrand, you basically put a coat of paint on the building, a new one. It's a bright shiny.
Yeah.
Hey, we're purple now, and the logo's slightly different, and we have a new font.
5% improved. Yeah.
Right. We have this new font, and it's beautiful, and we're going to get everybody to say these words. And the thing that's missing is this actionable thing, this real, tangible, going back to your Waterford, this new designer, something new. And so when you have this new vision and you actually execute it against it, where the product roadmap completes the vision, you say, here's where we are, here's where we're going, and look at how these pieces fall together. You really have something where the CMO is really helping drive the organization. And with that brilliant piece of insight, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to zero in on two things. We're going to talk a little bit more about narrative, and then we're going to get into mobile and what's going on in that world. So stay with us.
You've been listening to another great interview on Renegade Thinkers Unite with Drew Neiser. But the value doesn't end there. As a listener, you can download a free ebook from Drew, Renegade Thinkers, interviews with 11 trailblazing CMOs any business can learn from. Top marketing thought leaders and proven executives from Time Warner, American Express, and Chico's, and others. Get your free copy at renegadethinkersunite.com/ebook. For listeners only at renegadethinkersunite.com/ebook.
Okay, we're back with my guest, Barry Nolan, who is the CMO of Swerve. And when you've used the term narrative, and I'm going to call you out, and you use the term story, what are you actually telling a story like Once Upon a Time?
You can be when you get up on a whiteboard and you sit in front of a customer and you draw it out visually. That's a really interesting process to go through, and it's a really interesting process, in front of a customer. So sometimes it's as simple as that, but actually narrative, there's essentially 5 things we do in B2B marketing, and it starts with narrative, which is, the why change and why change now type story. Secondly, the second thing you have to do is, so say you get that thing and you have an understanding of where the industry is and where it's going and what's the gap. And obviously, your software or your service is the gap to get that individual there. Secondly, you need to express and condense that narrative into the 3 to 4 people in that organization who are going to influence or purchase your software. So it might be somebody who's in charge of customer acquisition. It might be somebody in charge of customer support. So you have a core story, but you sort of paint it in pain points for that particular persona. And the third thing, which is, the harder part of this is actually creating authentic content. And I mentioned, there's so much crap content that companies spit out. And sometimes CMOs are metriced on, hey, have you done 10 blog posts? Have you done this? How many social posts you put out? Oftentimes you're better pulling a lot of that back in and really, really working hard to create content that's authentic and it means something to an individual when they read it.
So how do you know it's authentic?
Well, you can't, firstly, you see it in the numbers and you see it in the engagement and you see it later on downstream. And if you've instrumented your marketing stack, you see it in attribution to say that this particular webinar, really resonates, or this particular white paper is widely shared, or it's quoted a lot, or you see it in SEO where people are linking into it. So you can see it in, if you've instrumented your marketing stack, and you've worked hard to, on attribution, so you can see it in that data. But you can also see it in the terms of, the amount of energy and effort and sweat and consideration your team puts into the content that they're delivering.
So with 150 customers and I prospects, because we're talking about all the OTTs, all the over-the-top networks are your prospects, right? Those are these. And for those who don't know what an OTT is, this is basically a direct-to-consumer video channel, right? I mean, it's a channel that is direct.
Yeah, that's one of the verticals we target. So we would target like large airlines. So we have a technology that sits inside apps. And those apps are traditionally mobile phone apps. Increasingly, they're apps that sit inside TV screens, on Apple TV, or there are apps within apps, like, within things like Facebook Messenger. So we live in the world where, consumers use apps, and we target a number of verticals. So OTT would be, organizations such as Netflix, or airlines such as Ryanair or Emirates would use us to communicate with their customers through apps.
Right. Okay. So, but you had a small customer base. And so part of that, and what do you think what's interesting about that is the good news, bad news. I mean, the good news is it's a small customer base. You know who they are, and you can probably get it down to the individual name. The bad news is you probably don't get that many swings at the plate with them, right? So you got to get
that's a huge, that's the joy of this challenge, because, as I said, we have 150 customers, and if we're doing this podcast in a year's time, we might have 180 customers, and I'd be super happy if we have 180 customers, because all of those customers pay us a lot of money. And the interesting sort of marketing or selling challenge is that, so for example, one of our customers would be Emirates, right? Emirates Airlines. They have 60 million passengers a year, and they do many, 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 many billions. Or another customer would be, say, Ryanair, who, have 120 million passenger journeys a year, and a lot of them are purchased through mobile apps. So that is our sales challenge is, and that's quite a thing, right? These are big enterprises who are extremely demanding on, this stack that has to be enterprise ready. And you are effectively a startup selling to that. Now, we're not quite a startup anymore. We've raised about $70 million and well established. But that's a really, really interesting challenge. And it kind of goes back to what we've been speaking about, that it isn't say, if you just bring this back to demand gen, it isn't one where we pray and spray and, do loads of advertising and attend loads of events and, do all that and hopefully we'll generate some leads. It's incredibly targeted. And you know exactly who in this said organization we need to speak to. And this person is typically quite senior, with utter low tolerance for BS or for sales even, so that when you do get in front of that person, you go, I understand what you do, and they can see some of your value propositions, and you have a very sort of professional, authentic selling organization. So so we don't do any, and we have done it in the past where you do the very expensive and very wide-ranging demand gen, but have forgotten about how to speak to the customer authentically, understand their problems, and show how you solve said problems. So that's a really interesting challenge when you're a small organization selling to billion-dollar corporations. So you have to be very targeted, very planful, and very authentic about it, and invest an immense amount of money in the AE organization, from training, enablement, air cover, support from executives to go out and sell.
Okay. So you're an app-based thing, which gives you sort of insight into the mobile world. And we don't have a lot of time on the show, so we're not going to talk in detail about mobile.
Yep.
What is some of the advice that you have to your fellow marketers when it comes to creating apps that, that actually people want to use and will engage with?
Well, you said it there, create something that somebody wants to use. So, there's really two classifications of apps. There's apps that you use to waste time, Netflix or Facebook or Instagram. And there's apps that you use, there's three classes of apps. Apps you use to waste time. There's apps you use to communicate with people. And there's apps that you use that save you time. And lots of enterprises should never be, using apps to maximize customer engagement. You actually want to minimize the time somebody spends in your app. Let me give you one example. So one of our customers is a very, very large bank. The CIO told me, last year, he says, in any 1 minute inside our mobile banking app, we have more customers in that 1 minute than in our entire branch network in a week, which is an amazing statistic. So all his customers are going there, which is great, except when you get to the kicker on this is they visit nearly every day. They visit 22 times a month, but they stay on average for 17 seconds. So that's a really interesting challenge for that CIO in terms of all my customers now live behind this app. They visit me every day. They visit for a few seconds. And that fundamentally changes the interaction model. For example, they would have done a lot of email sort of, marketing previously versus, these individuals are now living behind an app and they're not necessarily reading the emails. So the interaction model needs to be really, really personalized, hyper-targeted to that individual. And actually, we can do these things now, that when you're hyper-targeted, which might mean, here's a message for this individual that's important, and hyper-personalized. You might deliver it in the moment of need or anticipate need. You get actually really, really interesting results. So the old stack of email and sort of static lists does not apply to this sort of real-time, low attention or, hyper attention world where an individual is there for a few seconds, they're going to make a decision. The other sort of final thing about mobile and this is not everything should be about marketing. Like when we started working with Emirates first, they did a really smart thing. They used their mobile app to make that journey of that user much better. So they would tell you about your boarding gate or boarding gate change or the flight's on time. When you arrive, for example, in Dubai, they say which queue to go to passport, which has got less. They tell you what baggage, carousel you're on. So basically, they're helping users through that journey. And those interactions had incredible feedback from users about Emirates. So they're using, mobile, not just to sell, but actually to augment the service. And maybe in the future, when you consider service marketing, there is no such thing as services. There is only service experiences. So digital and mobile is a critical part of delivering those digital experiences.
Wow, there's a lot of good stuff in there that I want to sort of highlight. It's so interesting because I think about my banking app and it's the same experience every time. And it's about 7 clicks to get to the deposit, which is the thing I use.
Yep.
If Netflix was my bank, they would know when I opened up the app, it's, hey, you deposited last time. Would you like to deposit again? And they would do that. And people who like to deposit also like to do this. They check their account. That would be much smarter.
So let me give you one example of that. So, and with the same bank, on a Thursday, every 2 weeks, they get individuals coming in 20 times in that day. It's because it's payday, right? So what they did is they just changed that to did a push notification. Hey, your funds are in. Such and such, $5,000 transferred to your accounts. And that actually stopped people obsessively opening the app on that day. And actually the bank is serving a much better need. They're anticipating the need of these customers and reaching out to them a notification. Hey, you got paid. And that's a really sort of interesting micro moment where they're delivering, a really great service experience, which is not classical marketing and it will never be, but actually it's enhancing the brand value to say, hey, you got paid. Right. All's good.
These days, it's all marketing, right?
It is. Yeah.
The experience is marketing because if the experience is positive, you rate the app higher. That's marketing, right? Because you got a good response.
Exactly.
One of the things that you mentioned that I also think is interesting on the Emirates example. This is a brand. It's a premium, super premium, ultra premium brand where service is part of their core DNA. So it makes total sense that they would build an app that would be able to extend that sort of luxury experience. And you would kind of expect it, but it's still cool to hear about. And so I think it's really important as you're looking at these things to decide, again, this goes back to what we talked about earlier. If you have a clear vision for your brand, then when you create an app, the app reflects that vision and is in service of that vision. So, anyway, this has been a really interesting conversation. I guess if I were to ask you to sort of wrap up maybe as someone who was approaching this world of apps and mobile marketing, maybe you could give me 2 do's and a don't.
Oh gosh. Oh geez. That's a hard one. I'll give you 1 to do.
Okay.
Right. If you're building an app, have a clear understanding what job that app is going to do. Don't have that app be a shrunken version of your website. Apps do different jobs for customers. So just have that one vision. What is this app here to do for our customers? And when you do release that app, instrument it, do surveys, speak to your users, and focus on that one thing. You think about Uber. You fire up Uber, press a button, and the car comes and picks you up. And it does one job exceptionally well. So don't think about it as an app. Think about what job you're hiring this app to do for your customers, and go from there.
It's right. I heard the expression early on. We did developed a couple of apps for clients many moons ago, and the goal was do one magical thing. Right.
Yeah.
Do one thing that's amazing. And sort of sidebar on this thing. So I decided to give Lyft a chance. And sorry, Lyft, but I was in the Atlanta airport and I pulled up the app and it says, hey, your driver is here. But I couldn't find where the driver was and couldn't hit them. Now, it could have been a latest version issue, but whatever it was, I couldn't communicate with the driver. So that was it. I had to blow them off and boom, got to back to Uber. And it's amazing how one simple thing like where did you put the button to communicate with the driver determines that experience. All right. Well, enough on that. Barry, it's been terrific having you on the show.
Likewise, Drew.
I really appreciate your insights, and there's so many things that I want to wrap up with on the show to remind yourself as you're going about this process of marketing. Really taking a very careful look, and making sure you have that vision. We talked about that quite a bit, and Barry used the term narrative. One of the things that I think I encourage every CMO who's listening to this and marketer to do is go do the pitch yourself. Boy, that came through loud and clear. And that's a fresh thought. That is not something that we've mentioned in any of the shows before. You have to get out there. You have to wear those shoes and really get that customer feedback. Third, we talked a lot about selling, but it's funny, as we got deeper into it, it really wasn't a pitch. It sounded very much like a consultative sale, what they call the challenger sale, where you are helping paint a vision for this customer about what the future would like, how your product can help them be part of this future. So it was a really interesting a chat. We covered a lot of ground, a lot of good stuff. I can't wait to go back and look at the transcripts. So for all my listeners, thank you as always for being part of the show. We welcome your feedback. If you enjoyed it, you can share the love by sharing it with your friends and writing a review. And until next time, keep those Renegade thinking caps on and strong.
This has been Renegade Thinkers Unite, but it doesn't end there. Just go to renegadethinkersunite.com for more and subscribe to the show. That way, you'll never miss an episode. We'll talk with you next time on Renegade Thinkers Unite.